As I say, good afternoon and welcome to the first in our series of monthly webinars. My name is Matt Gibbs and I head up the contract team here at VMA Group. I'm delighted to be joined by two exceptional communications professionals today as they share their insights into all things merger and acquisition comms. This is a very popular session, as I mentioned, and I'm excited to see how our experts manage the communications before, during and after the multi-billion-dollar merger between OneWeb and EutelSat. Just a very short intro from me today so the speakers can have as much time as possible to share their wisdom with the group. I'd like to give a quick overview of who we are here at VMA Group, what we do and why we host these sessions. So we're a corporate communications, marketing and change recruitment consultancy founded in the 70s and operating across the UK and Europe and slightly wider afield as well. We cover roles of all shapes and sizes on a permanent and contract basis and have one of the largest networks of corporate communications professionals in the UK. As I said, I head up the contract team, where we have 5 consultants specialised in placing contractors of the highest quality in everything from crisis communications to BAU MAC covers, and as the webinar suggests, M&A comms programmes. We actually did place both Tabitha and Monique at OneWeb. As well as day-to-day recruitment and executive search, we also offer advisory services run by our Managing Director, Lucy Cairncross, and the leadership team. We publish industry-leading reports, the next of which is our internal communications report, Inside Insight, gathered from over 550 internal communications professionals that will be launching at the end of the quarter. And we host knowledge-sharing sessions and events such as this one, both in person and virtual. The reason we do that is to highlight the exceptional work that communications professionals do, making a real difference to the success of business projects. It also enables communications people to share tips and best practice with the wider community, helping people to upskill and learn. And it gives the opportunity to people to ask the experts and improve their knowledge and understanding of different areas and comms. And finally, it helps us as recruiters in the field to better understand the key trends and requirements in the market, so we're better placed to advise both clients and candidates in the future. So as I say, that's probably enough waffle for me today. Don't forget to ask any questions that you may have in the chat. We'll do a Q&A session at the end. I do hope you enjoy the session. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Tabitha Aldrich-Smith, VP of Marketing Communications at EutelSat OneWeb, and Monique Simpson, Communications Lead at EutelSat OneWeb.
Thanks you very much. Awesome. Right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. UK friends, I hope you have some yummy lunch and you're all settled in. Hello to anyone in New Zealand if you're watching. Can you go to my screen? Just checking.
Yeah, all good, Mon. Thanks.
Fabulous, fabulous. All right, crack into it then.
Cool. Well, let me thank you, Mon. Let me just introduce myself, and Mon will introduce herself, and then we'll get into the presentation. And just a quick word that we pitched it. The whole presentation really is our experience from the merger between EutelSat Group and OneWeb. So it was a long process, over a year actually. So we've gone back and really delved into remembering what was all about the start of last year and then this year when the merger happened this autumn, just previously. So we're just telling you our experience. I'm sure a lot of you have lots of merger experience and some may be new to it. So hopefully we pitched it kind of in the middle to give an overview of our experience, but there's time for questions at the end. And we've written a kind of little paper. So if you want to ask us any more information, we're happy to share that with you too. So me, I'm Tabitha. I was indeed placed at OneWeb 5 years ago, almost to the day now. And now OneWeb has turned into EutelSat OneWeb. For 5 years, I've been leading the marketing communications at OneWeb, which is everything from amplifying rocket launches to branding to our business-to-business marketing campaigns at a global level, and to set-piece M&A, for example, or other types of regulatory communication. So we're going to talk about the combination between EutelSat Group and OneWeb. And I was part of the integration team for this programme. Actually, we had 15 work streams across both organisations, of which I particularly looked after internal, external communications, brand and culture. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted with lots of you on the line today about how important comms and marketing are to successful M&A work, because after all, we're the ones that are winning hearts and minds, whether that's shareholders or employees or customers. We're the ones preempting questions and thinking about how to communicate the brand and the vision for the newly formed entity. So I'm really delighted to be here with Mon today, because we worked really closely together on this programme from start to finish.
Cool, thank you, Tabs. Yes, I am Monique, Mon, if you'd like. I am the communications lead at EutelSat Group. I joined what was formerly OneWeb in, 2022 now, I think. And I was brought on to implement and manage the internal comms strategy for this merger. My background is not only in internal comms, I have worked across external, customer, B2B, partner comms, across a variety of industries. But special mention, I actually came from the space industry in New Zealand. So it's lovely to be back, particularly for this exciting merger journey that we've just been on. So we thought we would set the scene a little bit and kind of give you an idea as to what we were doing. So OneWeb is a low Earth orbit satellite company. We were merging with EutelSat, who is a geo satellite company. As you can see from this infographic, we started off with about circa 2,000 staff to integrate, worldwide global offices around the world. We're a B2B business. EutelSat, who we merged with, have an HQ in France. So we had that added element of, translating all of your comms into French labor laws, all that kind of fun stuff. So this infographic was actually one of the first communication tools we produced, just to give the staff, I guess, a high-level picture of the synergies and differences and where we were genuinely starting from. We have a young workforce, which is very typical of the space industry. But as you can imagine, it's the first kind of merger for most of our employees. So we really wanted to bring them along the journey. Our mission, this was a growth merger. So our goal was to become the world's first multi-orbit satellite operator, which we did. And I guess lastly, just for a bit more kind of color, prior to day one, OneWeb was a private company and EutelSat was a public company. So we also had the additional element of listing to the London Stock Exchange as part of our merger.
And this, as Mon said, was our first piece of communication, and it really set out to introduce each other as organisations. We didn't know much about EutelSat; they didn't know much about us, or even though we were in the same industry, it's really important to kind of do that very first step. Who are these people? What are they doing? How are we similar, and how are we different? So that was the first bit of starting point.
Absolutely.
So moving on to our challenges, there's a fair few, and with each merger that happens, there's going to be slightly different ones. So we're just going to talk about ours here. So mergers and acquisitions are two terms that are often, of course, used interchangeably, but they are quite different. So a merger is when two entities about the same size will combine forces to create a new organisation with a new ownership structure and usually a new management structure. And an acquisition is more about a takeover of one entity by another, and the smaller company is often consumed and ceases to exist. So the first challenge really is to understand what exactly is happening. Is it a merger? Is it an acquisition? It may be different parts of that. So you really want to understand what the objectives and intentions are expected from your audiences. You need to understand the brand too, and figure out how you'll leverage or managing those brands as you go through. So that was the first challenge, to understand the perceptions of each organization that's merging and what is actually happening so that you can plan ahead. And understanding those brand perceptions from customers, from stakeholder organizations, from shareholders is really important, because then you can map where your company is going, depending on what kind of M&A activity it is. So that's the first challenge. The second one that I've sort of bundled a few things in here: regulatory ownership and competition challenges. So this is when you need to, as a comms team or individual, get really close to the legal team in your organization, because obviously it's going to be unique to what you're working on. At OneWeb, it was extremely complex. As a global organization, we had over 10 different countries that had to approve the proposal to merge, as well as 2 different government shareholders. That's the French government and the UK government, which is an owner of OneWeb, and then several associated competition authorities. So all of those are kind of mapped out by legal or regulatory, depending on what teams you've got. So from a comms point of view, what are those challenges? Map those out and find out the timetable of when things are happening. We had some cultural considerations. Again, everything will vary depending on the values and the ways of working that you have. Language is a really obvious cultural barrier. Ways of working, governance processes, decision making, these are all examples of cultural differences that you might encounter in the organization that you're going to merge with. So just teasing out what those could be is another first step to understanding what your merger or acquisition is going to entail. And then finally, labour laws. This is where you get also very close to your HR team. You will be throughout anyway, but there's some strong considerations depending on what countries you're merging with. In France or Germany or Sweden, I've just picked 3 examples, but these are countries where there are highly controlled labour laws, which means there's going to be plenty of consultation periods for employees throughout the combination. We actually called it a combination. So it's at the early stages, it's a proposed merger, because remember, before you announce the fact that there's a merger, it's only going to be a proposed merger. So just think about from a labour and staffing point of view, there'll be many more periods of consultation depending on what markets you're working in and what cross-border merger activity is happening. So there are some examples of challenges. You'll think about your own, but it's really good to set those out right at the beginning and work through them with your best friends, who will be from the legal, the regulatory, and the HR teams as well.
Okay, thanks, Tab.
Very good.
We thought we'd just outline some high-level objectives. You know, these are relatively standard to any comms person, so they shouldn't be too unfamiliar. But we kind of distilled it into 3 main pillars that we centered our internal comms approach around. Of course, as I mentioned, you know, young workforce, we really wanted to hone in on the trust and transparency and, you know, supporting resilience. So those objectives really underpinned the comms that we produced. I think one of the things I'm most proud of is the balance that we struck between BAU comms and merger messaging. And what I mean by that is we had some lofty commercial goals that were running, you know, in parallel with our significant body of change, you know, our merger comms. So I think we had a really good balance between steering the ship and getting people to kind of stay focused on the objectives without, you know, minimizing or over complicating our merger messaging. Of course, both narratives feed into your growth strategy, but overall, the balance between these 2, in my opinion, set a good pace and a nice balance for our comms.
Yeah. So from an external point of view, again, you know, Mon and I were working side by side, but we need to understand deeply what those overarching objectives are. Why is the organizations merging? What's happening? Why is there going to be a combination, for example? So you need to ensure that, you know, we have good conversations with the leadership of the organization, the CEO, the CFO, strategy, to understand what is it that is driving the M&A activity. So it could be, and I'm just being very general here, you're expanding your reach, you need to grow your revenues, expanding your market share, I don't know, strengthening your position for competitive advantage, improving customer service, you know, ability to have more firepower power for R&D. So those are kind of general examples. It you know, could be truthful for all sorts of mergers, but for us particularly at EutelSat and OneWeb, it was very much using this opportunity to come together and demonstrate the birth of a new and unique satellite communications leader. And we wanted to drive that positive global coverage to explain, you know, what were the benefits for joining together, communicate the powerful difference that the merger will make to the growth of the combined company. And our objective was not only to reshape the space industry by becoming together and becoming stronger, but also reposition Europe as a space leader, because EutelSat and OneWeb combined can be a really strong space leader in the market to tackle the competition from some of our other really heavyweight competitors. So that was a really strong external objective for us, and obviously to align our communications between our customers, our people, our shareholders and stakeholders, and understand the market. You need to just really work closely with your external agencies, if you have them, to understand what people want from the merger and then communicate it. So this was for our, you know, in simple terms, external messaging was about driving understanding of why we were doing this, showcasing the opportunities to do that with our customers, and then to devise the comm strategy that was consistent and relevant.
Lovely.
So this is one of the things I suppose I was particularly proud of, is creating that consistent story or narrative. This is what we started very early on to do. What is it, that single overarching, as authentic as you can get, the narrative about why we're doing this. And this goes across we created this narrative together, why we're doing it, what the opportunities in the market are, thinking about what that new vision or mission would be with both organizations coming together, and thinking about the immediate priorities once the merger is taken place. What do we have to do to deliver on our promises? And then let's give everybody a view or an example, a vision for the future. What is the new combined organization going to look like? And I think that as comms people, we're good at creating these stories, but it has to be authentic, true to what the people and the shareholders are really understanding about it, and understanding what's going to come out of this opportunity. So, you know, why are we doing it? And we repeated that why for a year, you know, because it's a long time. A merger often can take a long time. So really to remind people over and over again about this core story is the critical piece. So yeah, keep it authentic, but do it in a way that, you know, if you followed this pattern, it might work for you, but this is what certainly worked for us.
Just to quickly build on that, for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting Tab, she is truly the best storyteller I have ever met in my life, and the narrative that she created genuinely informs so many of our comms. So yeah, your story, Tabs, helped that consistency. So thank you. Right. Okay. So you now have a bit of context for our merger and what we were aiming to achieve. So we thought we would step by step kind of share a bit about how we tackled it beginning to end. So starting with internal plan. Seems simple, but for us, you know, we met our comms counterparts at EutelSat as early as we could, as frequently as we could. We hosted a series of workshops to kind of, you know, A, get to know each other, but B, you know, identify your synergies or differences, align on what you are trying to achieve. I'm like many of you, I'm sure, I'm a very meticulous, planned, detailed person. So it was really important for me to work backwards from day one and really align on deadlines, not only with your team, but with the wider kind of work streams. And then, you know, you're walking into it with eyes wide open, knowing exactly how much time you have. So plan. Secondly, identify. So again, you've built out your timeline. You have a really good idea as to what comms tasks lie ahead, but what about your interdependencies with other teams? I'll give you an example. So for us, we chose not to merge our IT tenants until after day one. So what we're in the middle of right now. But it's even little things like on day one, you know, obviously we still had different email addresses, different intranets, all that kind of good stuff. So how will you send emails? What email address will it be from? Will it come up as spam to the other company? How can you securely share documents? Will everyone be able to access your day one live stream? Things that, you know, seem kind of normal to us, you know, really drill into that detail because that can catch you out. Thirdly, produce your comms. 3 small words, months of agonizing and late nights and proofreading. I guess what I wanted to call out here is cybersecurity. So for us, cybersecurity was a huge, huge focus. And, you know, your merger is public, which means that you are actively going to be targeted on day one. You know, your staff are ripe for the picking for social engineering. You're vulnerable. You know, even on day one, your comms from the CEO, you know, a threat actor might try to, you know, pretend that they're your CEO. So we hosted a cybersecurity campaign in the months leading up to day one. And I am pleased to report that we had an increase in phishing reporting and a decrease in dodgy links clicked. So yeah, really, really key highlight, cybersecurity. Which also kind of ties into my second point of, you know, of course you'll have to set up additional or new communications channels. So for us, this looks like we facilitated a merger newsletter, a new intranet. We changed the way we distributed our CEO comms, and we hosted more frequent town halls. So again, things that are changing in your business, just be aware of the cybersecurity aspect to this. And lastly, check in with your employees. What do they want? What do they need? Again, this is not new to anyone here, but I think for me, it was about being genuine and authentic about it. One thing that did surprise me was the appetite for merger information throughout our employees was astronomical. And, you know, as comms people, I think we spend so much time trying to not over communicate, not spam people, but our staff just couldn't get enough. And so what that meant was for us, even when we had nothing to say, we said that. An example, so in the regulatory phases when we were still getting sign off, obviously there were some weeks that would be a bit more slow, right? So in our CEO message, our first few lines, hey team, no merger movement this week, but we'll come back to you as soon as we know everything, BAU. So again, that really helped with transparency and bringing on our kind of younger workforce across that journey. And lastly, just touching on the authenticity and being genuine, we held 2 major culture surveys, and we essentially asked people what they wanted and what they wanted to build in the new company. So yeah, again, that 2-way feedback loop, super, super important. Oh, cool, timeline. So this is a real life example of a high level timeline that we worked to. We shared this with staff and we updated it and changed it as you know, dates and things changed. I think the key thing that I'm keen to communicate here is that for us, pre-merger, the company maintained a very strong kind of BAU focus, and merger work was really only contained to work streams. So there was no real like call to action for staff pre-merger. On day one, our motto was nothing changes on day one. So you have staff members on day one, they can turn up to work, continue with their same roles and responsibilities. You know, there's not too much disruption, same focus on delivering excellence for our customers, you know, trying to keep it smooth as possible. And then post-merger, which is obviously where we're in now, full integration mode. So again, for us, that looks like full integration of IT. We're in the middle of a reorg, aligning on objectives, physical office access, all that kind of good stuff. So that's kind of how we tackled it internally.
Yeah, very good. So externally, the same as Mon, I'll just show you what we did to tackle the external communication side of things. And there's 3 big chunks of activity that happens. There's the first one, which is the press release and the shareholder communication that announces the proposal to merge. So again, that's very much a proposal until it's gone through all the regulatory and competition hoops. But that's your very first big announcement, and that's the one that will come as big news to many people. That's your biggest bang for your buck, if you like, from a PR perspective. And then you're working variously on other set piece announcements, maybe some pre-close announcements, shareholder meetings or EGMs, and that signals that you're about to finalize the transaction. And then you've got your final closing announcement, which is the confirmation that the transaction has gone through all its regulatory requirements, and that is effectively your day one communication. And that's when you become that day one is when you become a new organization. So those are the sort of three big chunks of activity. But just behind that, what does the plan look like? So again, here, understand each audience. We know that from a comms perspective, really getting to know what each audience believes about the merger and how do we want their beliefs to change. So that was the pre-planning for our audience. And I've talked about that core narrative, the importance of having a core narrative, and keep going back to it, repeating the messaging in all your communication. One thing I'd also like to say when you're planning your messages is read the small print, get into the detail of the prospectus. That's the big financial document that explains what the merger is all about and why. So why, when, what's the objectives? Are there any special requirements buried in that prospectus that a journalist might pick up on and ask you? So really get to grips with the detail. Then there's the planning part, and as Mon said, there's plenty of deadlines, but they do tend to change a lot. So if you've got a good plan, it makes it easier to change that plan, and you might have to do that several times over, but to manage deadlines, but you have a robust plan behind that. So you need your crisis management playbook in case everything falls out. What would happen then? Your leak statements, particularly for the very first announcement about the merger, that's absolutely critical. Q's and A's for the media, for your internal team, particularly for customers, media training. So all of that stuff, get that done early, and then you can repeat and refine as you go. You want to plan what happens in the period leading up to that closing announcement for your merger. There could be all sorts of things that happen during that time. So just make the timeline as Mon showed you with the timeline, and then think about how you leverage or minimize, depending on what's required, existing diary dates. So of course, nothing stops. We do emphasize keeping on with business as usual communication. We're still doing external communications. The CEO or your staff might be going out to trade shows and events. They need guidance on what to say and what's happening, and the latest updates customers want to know, and you can use those to your advantage to remind people, again going back to the core narrative of what's happening and why and when. So just keep in mind that everything will not stop until you've done the merger. It will keep going, and it should keep going, but you just need to manage the messaging around that. And then minute by minute planning for the day, pre-day one, if you're doing any pre-briefings, investor meetings and day one. So everything from when are we posting social, when are we issuing press releases, when is the CEO going to make an announcement to the staff, all of those activities, and you'll have plenty of them, need to be minute by minute, so everyone is super clear about what they need to do. So plan. And then just another note, just from our experience, was on sign-offs. So Mon's smiling on this, but it's really about, comms is obviously you'll be working with HR and your deal, your transaction team, the legal team. All of these teams need to review and sign off on the communications. So you'll really want to make sure that all of those approvers, and you've got one set in your organization and also another set in the organization that you're doing the merger program with. So there's a double set of approvals and sign-offs, and you want that really to go smoothly. So just prepare that runway for yourself. And then activation, actually, on the day one. In fact, day one news, you have to work quite hard to get the communications and the PR, because to some extent it's not new news anymore. It's been running, certainly for us, for a year. So everyone knew it was going to happen, and they've pre-signaled it and talked about it and written lots of press releases, media articles about it. So to some extent, that activation, really think about that final day one communications, because your very early communications will have said it all. So yeah, so that's our external comms broad plan for you to think about.
Lovely. Oh, exciting. All right. Well, day one, it's all happened. All of your planning and preparation has led you to this one moment, and it flies by like the blink of an eye. These are just some of our obviously our staff activations. So we held live streams, brought everyone together. It was a real kind of convivial moment of celebration and collaboration. It was a chance for everyone to, just hang out and celebrate a new future. And we ended up, I'm not from, don't know if you're familiar with the space industry, but every launch, we have mission patches or a big milestone in our business. And so we then printed out specific mission patches. So that was super fun.
Yeah, and as I said, from an external point of view, you're running through the merger. The big announcement about the fact that the merger is happening is your really big starting point. But then when you get to all the way through the combination, you've been working together with your counterparts in the other organisation, and you get to day one, that first day with the closing announcement, that's when your press has already happened. So the headline shouldn't be a surprise. The real focus is your customers and your stakeholders, and reminding people again, going back to the key narrative of the strategic rationale for the combination. So here we are, you can see we were working across France, US, UK in particular, media. So those were our core focuses. And then we also very much looked at our trade press to remind customers of why we were doing this, and that the opportunity for customers out of the merger. So yeah, that was just a kind of snapshot of what we achieved, and I think broadly the press was really positive because it had been signalled well in advance. So give yourself plenty of runway to signal those messages.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, so then what happens next? Right, so your day one's over. Cortisol is high. Pause, celebrate, reflect your success, your months of hard work. I think our team took a bit of a long weekend afterwards. We were all pretty knackered, but no, it's such a great moment. I think a few of the learnings from us. So signpost information to your employees more than you think you need to. And what I mean by this is, I think because you're so close to it, you've been living and breathing this project for the last X amount of months. It's easy to forget that this is completely new for employees. So just signpost things more than you think you need to. New processes, new comms channels. Is their HRBP different? It's really consistent messaging. Weaving in the strategy messaging. So as Tab said before, you've done a fabulous job at celebrating your narrative. Selling your narrative. But how do you prove that it's working? So for us, what we did is quite quickly after day one, we got together and came up with a set of key messages and tangible proof points that showed that our merger strategy was working. And so we had this core set of messaging, and we basically use this and weave this into all of our comms messaging across internal, external, social, so that we had a consistent narrative that proved that our merger strategy is working straight from the get-go, and it's doing what we need it to do.
Yeah, and just continuing from there, this is the time when you kind of reassess what your integration or working together, your merger looks like now. Having done it for so long, what's changed, and things will change over time. So just reassessing what is going to be different from your plan, and you might then now take time to review that core narrative and update it together. So I think that's again looking again at that core narrative and thinking what's different. And I could have put this little diagram in at the very beginning actually, but here again, this is source from Denison Consulting, and it's really about that journey. What is it that you want to achieve as part of your merger or acquisition? And there's some different ways. So at EutelSat OneWeb, we started off actually thinking that we would be a kind of best of both organization, where we'd take the good stuff from both sides of the two businesses and bring that together. And actually, as we went through, we realized that we wanted to be more ambitious and be part of a transformation to find new ways of operating. So you've got to just re-look at where you want to go as two organisations and come back to that. And this is when the gear shift really happens into integration mode. So obviously you've closed the merger, and now you can really work together as one single organisation, or becoming that, work together to become that integrated organisation. So really think about, okay, well, what does that look like, and how do we listen to our people to say, you know, what is it they want from that integration, and think about where your direction of travel is. And I would just going back to the customer piece, really, again, this is a time when it's a refocus on the customers. Mon and I have talked in this presentation a bit about BAU, business as usual. We wanted all the way through to communicate to customers that this was business as usual, that they would still get the service that they expect from us throughout the process and afterwards. They're, you know, as customers, they're expecting their services to continue without interruption, and they really, you know, merger and structural changes are not something that they want to be reminded of. Really, they want to know that we're fully focused on them. So this was a really important message all the way through, is to make sure that there was a team of people within both organizations that were focused on the merger and the acquisition and the integration, but there was a bigger team that was very much focused on making sure the customers continued to have a seamless service.
Yeah. I think our CEO famously said in a town hall, "Customers don't care."
Yeah.
BAU. Cool.
So here's our final slide, just some thoughts. We had loads of key learning, in fairness, so we could have done a whole presentation on that, but just a summary here, from the opportunity to become the world's first multi-orbit satellite communications company, OneWeb and EutelSat coming together to form EutelSat OneWeb. We sort of reflected on what were the key outputs, and I think the first one is to really deeply understand and be realistic about what your stakeholders need from you as a comms person. And that is very different if you're naturally somebody internal to the organization that might want to know what's happening, what's in it for them, what are their opportunities for growth, are there any you know, job cuts on the horizon, who knows. They've got lots of concerns and need to address those. For customers, as Mon said, they just want to know what business as usual is. Your leadership will want to know that the comms team has got it all in hand, they can see the plans, and they know when they need to approve activity. So really think about each different stakeholder. And of course, all the stakeholders, especially shareholders, will want to know the strategic rationale. Why are we doing this? And be reminded of that all the way through. So that was the kind of what each stakeholder needs. And then to really use your external support. So in this, it might be that you have a management consultant. We had McKinsey working with us, your PR agencies, brokers and banking advisors and legal advisors, depending on the size of the merger. You'll have plenty of external support. And if you don't, I would recommend get a little bit, because they will help you be the eyes and ears for what's changing, what your shareholders and stakeholders are thinking, so you can adjust your messaging as you go through. And then they will be great support. We had fantastic support in terms of crafting the messaging and helping to refine what we were doing. But the essential piece, really thinking back, is that as a comms and marketing person, we really do own that message and own the way of communicating it and own the channels. So actually it's our job, it's our deal, and it's our responsibility, and our ownership. So taking that, don't let somebody else take control of that. This is your opportunity, but also your responsibility to manage that. And the external support is that, it's support rather than driving the plan. So yeah, that was my thoughts, particularly on the learning.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. And I guess finally, look, prioritize transparency and collaboration. I think one thing that worked really well for us was our parity of comms. So, pre-day one, our communications to both organizations were always sent at the same time with the same messages, translated or not, and staff were told this as well. So everyone knew that they had equal access to information, which obviously helped with transparency and, not feeling out of step with the other organization. Again, I think I've said it a few times, a really big focus on well-being, which is super standard as it should be in any company. But I just wanted to call out specifically well-being support for your middle management, because of course they're going to be the conduits between, your broader staff base and XCOM. So that was a real pressure point that we made sure to really take care of during this process. Again, around collaboration, no time for egos. It's a high pressure environment, and your resilience is tested. Our team, I'm so grateful. Our team did a fantastic job. We worked so well together. I think at the end of the day, you're on the same side. You've got the same goals. So just get on with it. No egos. And lastly, this is a fun opportunity to start fresh. This is your chance to streamline processes that don't serve you, to learn new ways of working from your new colleagues. For us, we upgraded our EDM platform. We gained better data and analytics. On the EutelSat side, they adopted our learning platform. So again, it's about joining forces to strengthen your customer proposition, your offering to staff. And, it is a bit, as with all change periods, it's always a bit, getting used to it. But once the dust settles, you are a stronger business for this change. So, it's just about bringing the best of both of your worlds together in an authentic way that feels, right for you.
Yeah.
Really?
I think, and just final, I think we can go to some Q&A now, but just that it is a real opportunity. It's almost like from a comms person, you've suddenly got a whole new set of statistics and data points and messaging to combine. So it's kind of like getting a whole new job when you're learning about a new organization and then sharing that learning. So and as I said at the very beginning, we've written a short paper. So if you need any particular help with your merger, if you're coming, or just from an interested point of view, we're delighted to share that with you. So did we have any questions, Matt?
Awesome, absolutely. And I just want to say a massive thank you to both of you for sharing your insights on what is a fascinating topic, but also, applying it to the space industry just makes it pretty cool as well. So, I particularly enjoyed the bit about the narrative and the build up to the 12-month, 12-month build up to D-Day, essentially, as well as the challenges that you didn't even expect that you were due to face. So, all really, really impactful, and I hope everybody on the call has found it, as I say, interesting. So we have had a few questions. Firstly, not quite a question, but a big Kia aura to Monique. So we've obviously got quite a Kiwi following here.
Excellent. Andrea, lovely to see you.
Good job.
Half the attendees are maybe the Kiwis here, sticking together.
Thank you,
so
team.
not quite a question, but I just wanted to say that. Quite a lot of it was with regards to agency support, actually. So I know you did pick up on it with regards to engaging with McKinsey and having PR agencies, but a couple of questions there. So did you use agencies, which of course you kind of answered that you did, but specifically, did you use any kind of strategic M&A comm support? And talk to me about your agency.
Our financial PR agency had a strategic M&A comms team, so they were very helpful to us. So yes, and then McKinsey as well. So we had some great support, but it is the real learning from out of this, that they are there to support you, and brilliant external bringing in knowledge. We learned a lot from the process, from the experts, but at the end of the day, it's your messaging, and the company best, the stakeholders best. So retain ownership of that. You drive it, but use them if you can.
Perfect. I'm also just a little bit conscious of time. So we did say it was 12:30 to 1:15. So if people do need to shoot, totally fine. Obviously, just dip out. But we will be staying on for, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 minutes to go through the questions if people are able to stick around. So there's a question about resources. I don't know if that means specifically people, but how many resources were needed to work internally and externally side with regards to team structure, specifically on the M&A?
Well, it depends on the size. So we had 2 internal comms, so Monique and our compatriot Sophie from EutelSat. So just 2 internally. Externally, there was 2 key leads, Katie and Anita. So actually there's from culture and brand, that was myself and another. So it was kind of, as Mon said, it was very much a parity of 1 each per organization. I guess the integration team was quite large because we had 15 different projects, whether they were technical integration, financial integration, HR integration, it was a whole organization. I should think there was about 10 communications, marketing and brand people altogether.
Thank you. Quick question, will this be recorded and accessible afterwards? Yes, it will be. We'll pop it on our YouTube channel, and I believe our marketing executive will be able to share it with the attendees as well. So quick question answered by myself. How did you manage communicating across languages? Do you have a multilingual team, or did you do that externally?
Well, that's that is a real challenge. Our EutelSat team, and this is part of going into a bigger organization, being French, they're used to having everything in French language, but also they operate in English too. So they operate from French and English, and they translated everything. They have a translation in-house, but we are used to doing that as well from a perspective of OneWeb. So we often translate things into Spanish, Arabic, Japanese. Depends where we're operating. So yeah, we use I think use your external translation experts too, but it's I think always localize the press releases. Very often we can use our basic French, or the French translation team can do the work, but just make sure that it's vetted by somebody that's the native speaker.
And just to build on that as well, even internally, I would generally write something in English. It would then get translated to French, and then it would have to come back to me to kind of make sure that it had translated correctly. So that also took a bit more time as well.
Yeah, just build in plenty of time for that process, actually.
Thank you. So I have a question here. If you could change something, go back and make it better, what would that be?
Oh, that's such a great question. One of the things I think is going back to the core narrative is I think sometimes that will evolve over time, and especially when you get to know both organizations together. So really, I would go back to that and relook at that more often. It doesn't necessarily have to change, but for example, we started out talking about a merger of equals, so 2 equal organizations, and that did evolve over time. And so it's really about just staying tuned into the overarching strategy, and it might be that there's some external forces that change the strategy and the need for the merger. So just stay really close to how your organizations are developing together, the external market, what's happening in the industry, because then you can keep your messaging up to date. You still really do need that core narrative, but just be prepared to flex it as well.
I think for me, I kind of mentioned it in the prezzo, signposting more. Post day one, we spent about a month saying, here's your new intranet, here is your new kind of comms inbox, here is blah, blah, blah. But then we kind of dropped off, and then we got lots more staff going, oh, where's this, where's this, where's this? So I think I wish we continued on consistently signposting, I guess, longer, basically.
Perfect. Thank you both. I have to be honest, questions are coming through thick and fast now. So I don't know if we're going to be able to get.
Thank you very much, everyone.
We'll try and do as many as we can. So here, at what stage did you start sharing the restructure and new leadership?
Really great question, and I think that entirely depends on your organization and where you are. But I'll just say what our organizations did is that they shared the leadership structure early as they could pre-merger, so that especially with the CEO and that senior leadership, the board, actually there were some changes to the main board, so that needed to be done pre-merger too. So trying to get the leadership really clear, so who's going to be our CEO, who's going to be in that executive committee. That was a really important part to do early on, so that everyone knew that as the transition went through who to go to. But then afterwards, the kind of the changes happen, actually for us happening right now. So it does take time, and so build in that expectation that things will take time, but you've got a solid leadership base.
That was also determined quite a lot by French labour laws as well. So again, it'll be different depending on who you're merging with.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you both. Could you give us your highlight and low light of the project?
I'll start with my low light. My low light was thinking about the branding. That was a real challenge to me. I mean, we had, I think, a brilliant outcome, but it was really hard because there's a lot of passion, and I think both organisations would say there's very much a passion about both organisations' brand. So it's really understanding how to bring those two things together, and what to do for the best, for the stakeholders, for where you are in the market, for what your customers perceive. So it was a low point and highlight, because we got to a great solution in the end, but it was really tricky, and it took a lot of conversation and discussion, and we did it, and we're really proud to what we did in the time, but it was a real challenge. And I think maybe be prepared for that, because you've spent as a brand ambassador, perhaps, really focusing on that with your organization. Then you have to be prepared again to, as Mon said, put your ego aside and say, right, what's best for the organization going forward. So that was me.
Gosh, my low light, and it's not a bad thing on anyone, but obviously the way that the chips fell without IT integration, it just made things a lot more difficult, particularly on day one. So when we had to set up live stream links, and we're only on one tenant, right? It's really hard to join the two together. So I think from an IT perspective, our IT team are amazing, and they did an excellent job. But obviously there were just a few additional workarounds, so that was tough. And then a highlight, just seeing, we are now the world's first multi-orbit satellite operator, and it's such a huge kind of milestone in the space industry at the moment. So seeing how excited people are to really take on our competitors and give them a good run for their money.
Perfect, thank you both. As I say, just one after the other now as they're coming through. Which shareholder group proved the most challenging, and how was this addressed?
Oh, well, for our side, I think it was really about communicating why we're doing this merger, and we kept doing that. That was really important. And EutelSat is a listed company in France. OneWeb is a private company, so I guess we had a board rather than a heap of shareholders. So it was very much from the EutelSat perspective to communicate the opportunity for the merger to the shareholder base there. That was, the biggest point to consider. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question with regards to more internal comms, probably one for yourself, Mon. I've lost it. Did you put in place any direct employee or listening feedback channels specific to the merger?
Yes, so many, constantly, all the time from the get-go. Across everything, we had an anonymous Q&A form that was there all the time right from the beginning. We held workshops. We had, executive drop-in sessions. We made sure that in town halls, if questions weren't answered, they were then answered at a later date, and then we put them those answers onto our dedicated intranet site and linked it to it in our newsletter. We were very, well, in my opinion, we did our best to really consistently have that feedback loop. So yes, and it still continues today, with our culture workshops and, building up in the new company. Yeah, that still continues.
Yep.
Thank you. And with regards to continuing, how long is the project team going to work together post-merger, or is it morphing into a more general transformation team?
Yeah, you're right. It is morphing into a general transformation team. And it was set out to work until just after day one. And then it becomes a sort of the people actually that worked on it, I suppose, for the 6 months where we had the full integration team, there were some that continued and some that passed the baton on to others. To be honest, it's quite exhausting, the integration process. So it's important to think about the team that have been doing it up to day one might want to break and go back to their day jobs, or they might not. So it's really, individually dependent. But for us, the intention was to keep that integration team going until it was about Christmas. So I suppose about 2 months afterwards, and there's still a core team now that will be continuing with the the integration, the transformation, the culture work. The culture is one where culture and IT probably, and HR. So you've got the IT transformations happening to give everybody the the technology platforms that they need. You've got the HR thinking about the reorganization, and then you've got the culture team really thinking about, okay, well, so what's the roadmap? What's that? We've set out a vision. How do we get to that for the organisation? So those are the three areas that that particularly keep going. Hope that
answers. Comprehensively. What were your main KPIs and how did you measure them?
Excellent question. So there was a lot of different KPIs. They really focused around getting the organisation ready to merge on day one. That, when the closing transaction closes and you issue the press release, and then the business is effectively one organisation. How ready is that business then to operate as one organisation? So the integration team, all the KPIs were around getting the organisation ready for that day one. And we had some PR ones, particularly around the press coverage and the sentiment and all of that kind of thing. But really, the KPIs were about how is the business ready to have joint governance processes, for example. If we had some questions, I think, is that we all had to answer around, that were devised by McKinsey, in fairness, to say, how ready are you if somebody has a customer query, where does that go? If somebody has a people query, where does that go? So it was really I think scenario planning was what their McKinsey particularly supported us on, and those formed, they were effectively the KPIs. Could we address and deliver those particular scenarios, whether they were internal or external. So yeah, that's, if you think about all the scenarios that you need as an organization and we needed in ours, we went through them, and if we could address and answer those, then we hit our KPIs.
I guess just quickly building on that as well, on the measurement side, just be aware that, you know, you might need to establish some comms channels where you might not have data and analytics available. Yeah, strongly advise pre-merger, you know, adopting a comms platform that gives you that measurement, you know, those measurement tools if you don't have them.
Excuse me.
Brilliant, thank you both. I think with it being just 1 minute to 1:30, one more question. You're coming up to now, so there's a hell of a lot of time you've given to this, and thank you again. So it's regarding the narrative. What was your core story which you used to sell the merger to your audiences?
Excuse me. It's a good job we're on a webinar today because I've got a cold. But anyway, in terms of the core story, in the deck that we showed, it was really about who we are, why we're doing it, how we're going to get there, and what's it going to look like at the end. So for us, it was about becoming that GEO-LEO global provider of satellite communications, to be the most trusted provider globally. We as a B2B organization, we really put our focus into being trusted, and then having a vision to grow and become the leading satcom provider. So and then we had some priorities, some internal priorities of what we wanted to do to complete the network and a few other things. So it was really getting people to say, right, this is where we are. This is why we're doing it, to grow and to tackle our competition. And then to say where we're going to get to, that vision. And then what are the priorities that we need to achieve to get there, the immediate priorities, while the business is reshaping a strategy and creating the new joint strategy as a joint organization. What are the things that everyone can be doing to get on with the job as a new organization? So yeah, why are we doing it really, and where are we going to get to, and what does that look like?
Brilliant, thank you. I guess Tabitha, after over a year of doing this and 5 years working at OneWeb, EutelSat OneWeb, it's coming to the end of an era. So emotional times, finishing off, I guess, the next week or so, is it, for both of you? So yeah, it's very fresh in the mind, and I want to say thank you again. Sorry I couldn't go through all of the questions. There were some more, but just conscious of time. And just a reminder to everybody still on the call that we are going to host these monthly. So we'll have different topics. We have 7 or 8 booked up for the end of the summer. So we'll share more information on our LinkedIn pages. If you are looking for a role, either contract or perm, specifically contract for me, I'd love to help. And of course, if you would be looking to hire myself or one of the consultants, I'd love to help too. But thank you again to both of you, Monique and Tabitha. I'm wishing you all the best for the last week or so, and with your search for your next role.
Thanks very much, Matt. That's great.
Thanks, team. Thank you for joining, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.